Welcome to Echoes from the Archives. I'm Assistant Archivist Jenni Barrientos, joined by my co-conspirator and fellow Medicine Hat history lover, Konrad of Bring Back the Porch. Recorded right here inside the Archives reading room at the Esplanade Arts and Heritage Centre in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, this podcast touches on some of the weird, wonderful, and interconnected stories from our little town. From alleged underground tunnels to haunted watermelons, I'm excited to introduce you to what makes Medicine Hat such a truly magical place, our shared history and our stories, and maybe a little bit of the paranormal. Come along with us as we discuss paintings with eyes that follow you and explore how archival records can hold the key to uncovering something truly surreal, that we are all even more connected than we thought. Allow us to show you a peek behind the curtain in archives, where history is exciting, surprising, and yes, sometimes out of this world. After all, I don't have an archival record at my desk called the UFO Files for nothing. So, whether you're a history buff, a skeptic, or just love a good local legend, settle in. These are just some of the echoes from the archives that you don't want to miss.
We are in the Esplanade Archives reading room for the first edition of what I hope will be many episodes of Echoes from the Archives. I'm very pleased to introduce Jenni Barrientos, the Assistant Archivist at the Esplanade Archives here, the point of contact for many people when they come through those doors. Jenni has been a godsend to me when I was doing the Our Towns, when I started to redo them again in around 2022, 23. If I needed images or pictures or background information, Jenni was my ace in the hole. So I'm glad that we get to do this because we have gone down many rabbit holes together. And I think tonight we'll probably go down a couple more, but welcome to the Porch.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and obviously in the archives there's no better place to have our little discussion, so I think that's really great. I did want to take some time to say that, we're really excited to be here in the archives, but we're also on Indigenous land here, so take a little time to do a land acknowledgement. We're on the border between Treaty 4 and Treaty 7. We're also a home of the Métis. And more importantly for me is to talk about the local connection to the history and to the land. So the Indigenous people being stewards of this land is really important to me. I've learned a lot about Medicine Hat's history, and a lot of it has to do with Indigenous people, specifically with Saratoga Park. So yes. We have a really wonderful, long-standing history of a Métis settlement down in Saratoga Park. I kind of wanted to start off with a little bit of a land acknowledgement here, and also to discuss about some really exciting history and some really cool stuff that I've been talking about.
There are so many stories hidden in the archives here. I've tried to tell as many as I could, but maybe we can touch on a few of them tonight. And there's one individual that you wanted to start with.
Yes, for sure. So I actually, it was one of the most serendipitous times that I had in the archives. I think it's because it seemed so mystical and magical at the time. So for me, I got a question from Lorene Marshall, actually. And so she came into the archives reading room and she asked me, she had been out at the Ross Glen Park. So there was a park there and it's named Harriet McCready Park. So Lorene came in and asked a question, as people always do to me. And she said, "Who's Harriet McCready?" And I said, "I'm not too sure. I will look into that for you." So I did a lot of research. I found some information. I shared that with Lorene. That was really great. So we talked more about that. And Harriet McCready or McCarty, it depends on who you ask. The Métis names can get a little tricky with pronunciation, but it is an Irish last name, so McCarty. So she's a Métis woman. She lived in Saratoga Park, and she was a philanthropist, so she was a big donor around Medicine Hat. She actually donated the park equipment at Riverside Park. So there's a lot of things there that are really cool about her. And so I told Lorene and shared this information. And then the next day, a fellow walked in, and he said, "I'm looking for information about Harriet McCarty." And I said, "Of course. Did Lorene send you?" And he said, "Who's Lorene?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I actually have a bundle of information about Harriet McCarty. I can give you all of this information." And his eyes kind of welled up, and he was like, "This is so important to me. I did not know any of this information, and we're related." And it's a situation where he didn't know that he was related to her. And so he found out also, after all of this information, he found out he was Métis. So he did not know that either. Mm-hmm. So this kind of solved a 64-year puzzle for him. And this was all it was one after another. I just thought, what are the chances that one person would come in and ask me a question, and then the next day, unrelated, another question? So we were able to share all this information. It was wonderful. I loved it. I actually went on the Saratoga Park trolley tour, and I saw him again. I was sat down on the trolley, and I was already ready to hear all the stories of Saratoga Park, and I feel this tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and I was like, oh my goodness. It was him, and we hadn't even planned it out at all. I thought, this is just magical. I just thought it was wonderful. So I shared a picture here of like Harriet's there, and Henry Aker is in the center. So Henry Aker was the last resident of Saratoga Park. So his house was torn down in 2010 after he moved out, or was taken out of Saratoga Park, if you will. And so he was there, and so he's related to the McCarty family. So it's actually kind of all serendipitous how it all came together. So I wanted to just mention that because I just thought it was so, it just really reminds me of how all these things in Medicine Hat are all connected. And it was really exciting to me, and I remember the look on his face. He's like, who's Lorraine Marshall? I was like, why do you want to know about Harriet McCarty? So it's really interesting, yeah.
Sometimes the stars align.
Exactly.
And I think we have a picture up there, too.
Yes, we do. It's very cool. So it's a really interesting piece how all of the people were all connected. And it just, I feel this like presence in Medicine Hat. Like sometimes people always want to talk about haunted things. Don't get me wrong. I love stuff that's haunted. I have a file actually at my desk. I call it the X-Files. It's like a little purple folder. I shouldn't say little because it's actually ginormous. And I put in anything that has any strange little piece. I photocopy, I put it into the folder. And I'm like, I can't wait for the day that I'm going to archive this, and they're going to be like, I can't believe that there's something called the X-Files. I was like, oh, yes, here we go. So, yeah, I put these little bits and pieces into there. And so I feel like Medicine Hat is so interconnected. Like all these different things, it's more of like an interconnectivity than it is haunted. But, you know, there are some pieces that are maybe a little haunted here and there. Depends.
There was one story that you shared with me about the former graves that were on the side of Scholten Hill.
Yes.
There actually is a clip in the archives of a woman talking about how her grandmother said that when they walked by those graves at night, you could hear a baby crying.
Yes, that's Daisy Laguerre, and she's a Métis woman who also lived in Saratoga Park. And we have that oral history. We're very happy to have some Métis oral histories available in the archives that you can listen to, so you can still listen to that. And those graves are so interesting because they're kind of one of those things that everybody kind of knew that there were burials there, but nobody really thought too much about it. But then once there was a lot more of the building in Medicine Hat, so they did, Scholten Hill and those sorts of areas, and then graves became unearthed, and then it kind of rocketed into the spotlight to talk more about these graves and these burials. So yeah, very interesting.
Strange requests you get. And you get a lot of them.
Oh my goodness.
You've told me many stories about how you sometimes get a request about something and it leads you down a path that you did not expect to go on.
Yes, and it definitely feels like it's somehow is all connected somehow, and it's like I sometimes tell these stories and I feel like people just won't believe me because I'm like, you won't believe what I heard at work today. But people come in with these questions. Like there was a lady who came in and she felt like her house was haunted. So she swore up and down her house was haunted, and she's like, I'm in Southridge, so I need to find out the information about my house. I was like, okay, well, Southridge, a little bit not as old as maybe you would think. So that was difficult to go try to figure this out. And I'm looking through all this stuff, and I'm trying to gather information. I can't find anything that seems haunted about this house. And then I said, well, it looks like the old owner of the house used to work at the IGA. She's like, oh, okay. And she kind of leans forward, and I'm like, okay, so this is somehow interesting to you. I was like, okay, well, I'll look more into this fellow. So then I look into it, and I was like, well, it seems like he was involved with some sort of, and I was like, I'm sorry, I have to read this to you, a toxic watermelon. She's like, oh my gosh, yes. I was like, yes? And she's like, yes, tell me more. Okay, yes, so there were toxic watermelons. She's like, this is all making sense. I was like, I'm glad it is to you. And so I told her this story about how there was watermelons that were at the IGA and they were sold and they were toxic, so they had to be taken away and tested, and it was a scandal that had happened. And she said that, yep, this makes total sense to me because every time I have a watermelon on my counter, it rolls off and it falls. I'm like, right, yes. And she's like, so the haunted watermelon. I'm like, yes. Yes, I'm glad I could have been there for that. And so I printed her the paper of the haunted watermelon and I gave it to her, and she was happy. She was like, I'm going to plant watermelon seeds in my backyard to appease him. I'm like, fantastic. He's not dead, but that's okay. Go on with your stories. So yeah, it's some of the questions I get are very interesting, but there's everything here that you can find, and it's kind of like going down that path as we go through.
Yeah, and you never know where it's going to lead you.
Definitely not. I got a phone call, and this person came, and he was phoning from the United States. And he phones, and the first thing he says on the phone, he says, "Don't hang up." I'm like, okay, this is starting quite strange. And he's like, the news won't take my calls, so I really need you to answer this phone call for me. I'm like, you've got me. I'm hooked. So, of course, I'm laser focused. I want to know what this guy's talking about. And he ends up telling me, he's like, "Did you know that cats and skunks can breed?" And I'm like, no, I can't say that I have heard that before. And he's like, yes, so I'm looking for an article in the 1960s of the skitten, of the cat-skunk hybrid skitten.
Skitten.
Yes. And so he's like, "This is very urgent. My lawyer needs this." I was like,
"Lawyer?
This is your lawyer?" He's like, "It's $1 million question. I'm not kidding. It's $1 million. I need you to find this for me. I need you to tell me who took the picture of the skitten." It's like, I will absolutely do my best for you. And I'm like on the phone, and my colleague Philip kind of pops his head out of his office, and he kind of whispers, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine." So then we go down, and I try to find, and lo and behold, there is an article about the skitten. They found this in Redcliffe, of all places. They found the skitten, and they took a picture of it, and it goes into the newspaper. And I said, "Yeah, I found it. I can email it to you." He said, "Oh, you're a doll. I love it. Perfect." And so I send him the article of the skitten. He's like, "Now, the person who took it, Mr. Brewster, took the photo. Can you tell me if he's dead?" I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with the story? And he's like, "Well, it's about copyright. So it matters to me if the person who took the photo, if he died before 1974, it's free and clear of copyright." I'm like, all right, yep, for sure. So then, of course, now I'm looking up grave markings to try to find if this fellow is dead, and all of this because of a skitten. So he did die before 1974. So the skitten is free and clear of copyright, and so we have gone and given the permissions for it, and the picture of the skitten lives on. So.
But did you get a cut of the $1 million?
I can't say. I'm legally obligated, but no, I didn't.
That will go to your grave.
I can't accept gifts. But yes. No, he did send me, over the phone, he said he sent me love and light to myself and all of my ancestors. So I felt very, like that was enough for me. That was a very interesting question I got. There
are all kinds of rumors about the history of Medicine Hat.
Oh, yes.
And one of them is the tunnels.
Yeah, you know what? The tunnels are the funniest thing because we get a lot of people who come in, and the first thing I say is, I was like, well, I'm gonna let you down easy. There's no evidence of tunnels. And then there's, of course, the whole bandwagon of people who say, "I knew you would say that," or "Who paid you to say that?" You know, I'm like, well, no, honestly, it's kind of one of those stories where we have a lot of things in Medicine Hat, but I don't really think we have the evidence that I can give you about the tunnels. There were a lot of underground things, like I did find some underground bathrooms at City Hall.
Yes.
As I was looking through some pictures. You could see some pictures, and apparently it was underneath the sidewalk in front of City Hall. So there was a panel of the sidewalk that they would lift up, and then under there it would be stairs that led down to a set of bathrooms. So that, but then of course people say, underground bathrooms, underground tunnels, it's a logical conclusion. But not so.
No.
So as far as I'm aware, there's nothing that would indicate that we have a series of tunnels beneath, but we were where we are in the Esplanade. There used to be a post office.
Down below us here.
Down below us. And so below us, there was a post office. So there was also what they call the bunker. A lot of people call it a bunker. It's not, in fact, a bunker. It was a civic defense hospital. So basically it was an overflow hospital. So the idea of that was if something were to happen to the original hospital, they were able to then use this as overflow. So if there was catastrophic nuclear events, they would use the overflow hospital. And it's really like we have a picture of it. We have one picture of it. Thank you to Tim McShane for sending that to us. And it's not very exciting.
But it was something that very few people knew about.
That is true, yes. And unfortunately, when we got to it, and so the post office was getting demolished, there was really nothing really left there. So it used to have cots and maybe like some medical supplies and things like that. But by the time that we were able to get in access to it. I say we, I wasn't there obviously, but it was emptied out. So it was pretty much an empty hole with nothing in it. So it's not as exciting as the bunker. And of course people then say, oh sure, there were tunnels that led from the bunker to the hospital to the, and no, not as far as we're aware.
Yeah.
So
I was asked that question once, and I went to a longtime resident, Jim Sharp, because his store was Hutchins and Sharp on 3rd Street.
Yes.
And I asked him, and he said, no. He said, I've never heard of anything. Although he said there was a door between his building and the one next door that allowed them to go back and forth. And he also heard a story, too, that once upon a time, city workers found a vault on 6th Avenue and 3rd Street that appeared to have been used for probably card games or,
Yes.
illegal drinking, that type of thing, because there was some empties on a shelf there. But that's as close to being a tunnel story as I can give you.
Yes, and I heard that there was a boxing ring below the Corona, because the Corona used to have on the side of it, there was a theater. So, and it actually looked exactly the same as Monarch Theater, the old style, with the arch and everything. It was modeled exactly the same, but it was on the side of the Corona. So the theory is that, it would have angled downward because it was a theater. So then when the theater was removed, they then used it for other, possibly a little bit below seedy areas. And so they used it for a boxing ring, and apparently it was a horse stable for a while as well. So, but not necessarily a tunnel, maybe more of like a reusing of some space, I think.
Yeah. And I think I heard a story too that also at one time was used as a bowling center. So
yes, exactly. I'm sure it would have been like great to roll your ball right down
downhill,
right where the theater used to be. Yeah. So, and a lot of that old infrastructure of Medicine Hat, it's too bad that it's gone now. That arch of the Monarch and the Corona, those are so beautiful. We do have pictures in the archives, and so a lot of the time with these photos that we have, it's a lot of our online access that you can see. So if you want to take a look through that, I always love to talk about our website, because sometimes people do come in and they go, I'm really looking for a photo, and I'm looking for a photo of Finley Bridge. And I go, yep, we got hundreds of them on our website. And they go, what website? Yeah. So we have over 100,000 photos scanned available on our website. So
100,000.
100,000. Yes.
I've probably seen all of them.
You may have. I feel like out of anybody, you might be through them. So yeah, you can click through, grab some popcorn, and go through all the photos of Medicine Hat. There's Mort Fulton on an ostrich. There's everything you could ever think of.
Morton Fulton.
Yes. What a wonderful guy. Yeah. Very strange. But yes. So yeah, that's kind of our excitement of all the photos of Medicine Hat. But you have a photo that I love too, with I like to call it the old-timey Photoshop.
Yeah. I think we have that one up there.
Yes.
That photo there is one that I giggled at the first time I saw it, because you look at the young boy and the lady. Yep. They are obviously been pasted on top of a picture of where the original ballpark was. And, at the end of the bridge there, the CP Rail Bridge. That's about 1910. You can see the water pipe in the picture. You can see the old armory. And there's another shot taken, of course, when the ballpark is there, which is... I always found it interesting why they put it over there, but that's where it was. It was I think they called it the exhibition grounds as well.
Yes.
All kinds of different things. The troops from the First World War would parade there as well. In that picture, too, you can see across the river there the long building. Yep. That's the old curling rink.
Yes. Yep.
And that's where Maple Avenue Bridge is today.
Yes, exactly. I've looked at that photo for numbers of different reasons, and you can zoom into different pieces and parts to try to get some different answers. Like we were looking for some old gas wells. That's a big thing that people use old photos for. They're trying to find locations of gas wells because they used to be everywhere, and now they have to be capped and monitored. So yeah, underneath the curling rink there was a gas well, so that had to be capped off as well. So there's lots of different pieces that you can look into these old photos and find. But yeah, the old-timey Photoshop is one of my favorite pieces. We have one that's kind of spooky too, because they took a photo at a funeral. And so there's a set of pictures. One of the pictures is empty in the center. There's no one there. So they're all set up on either side. And then the other picture is a picture of the person who's deceased, but they've propped their eyeballs open.
Oh.
And so then they glued them into the center. I did not include that photo because it's very creepy once you know the answer. So then they glued him into the center, and then it looks like he's a part of his own funeral. I'm not too sure stylistically why you would choose to do such a thing, but yeah, it's all sorts of different photos, and you're looking at them and going, wow, okay, I'm going to just put that back now.
There is another picture there, too, a color photo, of colorized photo of Athletic Park. And what I like about that is that you can see along the left field fence there, that running on the right side of, that's where the bottle depot is now, and that was called Bank Street.
Yes.
Bank Street does not exist anymore.
Ooh, we've had quite the time trying to find Bank Street, haven't we?
Yeah. And it would run across what is now Altwana Drive and up into the hill. But there was an actual street there called Bank Street.
Yes, and Medicine Hat changed the names of the streets in 1914, so that threw everything for a loop too. So every time people come and do research, it's kind of like I have to send them down these different paths. Oh, and by the way, the street names all would have changed. And oh, by the way, they rerouted Seven Persons Creek. So what you thought was on the north side is now on the south side. We chased around the isolation hospital for a while too, because that was back when tuberculosis was a thing, which hopefully is still not. But they had an isolation hospital, and so that was down by Seven Persons Creek. And so what happened was that it seemed like the isolation hospital was moving around, going on different streets. So it was on Spencer, and then it was on Kipling, and all these different... I'm like, what is going on? Are they picking up this hospital and moving it? But instead, they were actually digging out Seven Persons Creek. So it used to be kind of serpentine moving through, and they decided, nah, we want to just have it as a straight line. So they gave a guy a shovel, and they said, dig this out. His name was Mr. Black, and they wanted him to straighten it out, so they gave him a summertime and a shovel, and he by hand straightened out Seven Persons Creek, which made it so that the isolation hospital moved from one side of the creek to the other side, because Mr. Black actually dug it out by himself.
And I think Mr. Black had to go to court to get paid.
He sure did, yep. That was one of the first court cases that the city of Medicine Hat ever had, was the contractor said that he was going to pay Mr. Black his wages for digging out this creek, and the contractor got on a train with the money and hightailed it off to Winnipeg, never to be heard again, and Mr. Black went, City of Medicine Hat, I want my money. So then that was one of the first court cases that the city had to go through at the time. So it was big news. It was all over the place that Mr. Black was suing the city for his wages. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
A lot of people come here looking for family history. And you get some odd requests there, too.
Oh, yes. We've had quite a number of odd requests, and some of them even happen from different countries. So we have a lot of connection. There's a big Germans from Russia connection here in Medicine Hat as well. But we've had a lot of people who, there was a fellow from the UK that called and said that he wanted to find information about a little girl named Betty Jane. And he said, unfortunately, I don't know her last name. I don't know how old she is. But what it is I have a stack of letters that were kept. And so he was trying to figure out what she had anything to do with. Why was she related to the family? Did she have anything to do with him? So then I ended up going through the census. And it's kind of interesting because out of all the places, at least in Medicine Hat, if you're looking for somebody without a last name and you don't know her age and you don't know anything about her, if you just know Betty Jane, if you do a search in the census, 2 of them come up in 1926, and one of them was the person who I was looking for.
Needle in a haystack.
A needle in a haystack. Not something you could achieve in Toronto, I would assume. No. So in Medicine Hat we could, so we found her. And we still to this day don't really know the answer as to why there were these letters back and forth between the mother and this Betty Jane. But we did see on the census that it did say that she was adopted. So the idea is possibly that during the war, they often sent children from the UK to try to keep them safe, so they sent them to Canada. So it's a possibility that she was a war child that was sent over to be safe and possibly never went back over. So, and then as I was doing this question, I looked over, and that one of a donation that we had, and it was just sitting on the edge of my desk ready to be processed, it was something about somebody who was a boxer. And it ended up that was her adopted brother. And it was completely unrelated to what I was looking to. I was just like, okay, so there's this boxer here just doing this processing, and then it happens to be her adopted brother. It was just like,
There are
strange.
ghosts here in the
I feel
archives
like,
that are
yes.
putting things together for you.
I know. I feel like it's all connected, and it's the haunted watermelon all over again. Like, it's just like, it works out perfectly, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
So,
And you had one fellow walk in here one day with some DNA.
unfortunately, yes, we do not take DNA in any way, shape, or form here. Please don't ever bring me that. But yeah, we had somebody who thought that, Ancestry and 23andMe and the whole idea of like trying to find your family. So he had a little baggie in his hands, and I kind of clocked him walking through, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. He's like, so I have something. I'm like, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want that. I love that for you. I love that you're finding your family, but please do not give me whatever's in that bag. So I did send him away with his who knows what. And I did pass him along to Ancestry where they can do those sorts of DNA tests. But we also have a lot of hair in the archives, unfortunately. It's one of the job not exciting parts. It's not a perk, I would say. People do a lot of hair, like for clippings, for family members, those sorts of things. And like I was saying before, when people are colorizing photos, the ladies would want to clip a little bit of their hair so that you could get the color of the hair correct. So there's nothing worse than opening something or going through some photos and you grab and like you're just handfuls of hair. Just why so much hair? I don't love that about my job. So, when everybody says AI is going to take your job, they can have the hair. Yeah. The robots can have that. Yeah. I don't really want to do that.
But there's a story of why people kept hair in the Victorian times.
Yes, they kept it for mourning reasons. So there was also, we have a Victorian hair wreath where they would weave them all together. It's very beautiful. If you're okay with the hair, which I'm not a huge fan of, like I mentioned, but they would weave it together and it would kind of be like a way to show your family tree. So you'd have the gray hair and then the younger, and like you'd have a weaved family heirloom. Right? I love it. But there also would be funeral cards, and then if somebody was sending a funeral card, they often would send a lock of hair from the deceased person to the funeral card. So we do have funeral cards that unfortunately have hair with them as well.
Yeah, so that is preserved in perpetuity.
It is, yes, lots of strange things.
Donations, you were telling me earlier, though, are becoming harder to get because times are changing.
Yeah, it's a lot more digital files, so it's a lot more things. And who hasn't dropped a phone off of a boat into a puddle or something, like that. It's kind of hard for people to keep their digital assets together, and also the fact that it's just the amount. So if somebody's going to come and they're going to donate their photos, it used to be a selection of a few here and there, and now we're looking at 10 terabytes of information that's on a hard drive. For archives, we love digital is just fine, but there comes a time when you're like, this is a mountain of things. So it's tricky. It's hard too with copyright, with different things like that, to try to figure out how we're going to have these things. And people are a little worried about privacy as well as time goes on. So it used to be a negative would be one photo, but if you have a digital photo, you could have thousands of copies of that thing. Who owns the original? Yeah. Who keeps it forever? So, yeah, it's getting different as time goes on. Maybe a little less hair, I guess, as we move through, too.
There is one photo that you have in the archives that when you walk by, you get a creepy feeling.
Yes, that is Mrs. Bassett. So her eyes follow you when you walk by. So she is a giant portrait. She's in a gold frame. She is huge and matronly and stern-looking, and as you walk through to the archives, you turn the corner and you get to where the collection space is, and her eyes are just following you through. And I always tell everybody, just wave to Mrs. Bassett as you come by, and then the heads kind of do a double take. I'm like, yeah, she'll be watching you as you walk through. She was the proprietress of a local hotel, and she had sons, and her husband tragically passed away. And instead of giving the hotel over to any of her 7 sons, she decided she was going to keep it herself. So in the era of when, men kept the assets, she decided she was going to be the proprietress, and none of her children were going to have anything to do with the hotel. So she has this very stern portrait of herself, and we have a photo of her, and she's leaning against a piano, and she's in this beautiful, ornate, Victorian-style hotel room that was at the Cause, and she is sitting in front of the giant portrait. So we have the portrait of her on film and with the portrait of her painted behind her. So she very much loved that portrait. And she follows you with her eyes as you walk through the archives.
And you always say, hello, Mrs. Bassett.
I do make sure I say hello to her. I'm a little concerned that if I don't, she's going to notice. So, yeah.
If people want to make donations, how do they do that?
You just walk in the door. Sometimes you can make an appointment if you want to, but most of the time it's kind of like you're cleaning up, you're looking through your things, and you're deciding where do things go, what family's going to get what, and so then it's kind of spring cleaning. So we definitely to take things like that. I would prefer if you don't turn a box over upside down into a garbage bag and hand me that, but a little more order is preferred. You can keep the fingernails and the hair. I don't want that.
Yeah.
But most of the time for donations, we're just looking for things, anything to do with Medicine Hat. So sometimes people think, my family's we're not a member of the clergy, we're not a member of the church, we're not a member of council, why would you want my items? But that sort of like really organic history is super important for Medicine Hat to know that the people who were here that were hardworking, let's say your family worked at Medalta or you lived in the flats, those are things that are still really important for us to take care of. We always love seeing people of color, Indigenous people, their histories are super important. Sometimes marginalized communities feel like they don't have a space here, but we definitely love to take things that are related to those sorts of people and how to see how they live their lives in Medicine Hat.
The objects from everyday living all tell a story.
Yes, we love those sorts of things. We have some really cool stuff in the museum as well that really shows the kind of connection between the everyday and Medicine Hat. I love it.
We're going to take a pause here now for a few minutes, and when we return, if you remember the old Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, they used to have a segment called Stump the Band, where the audience would try to come up with a song that the band couldn't play. We're going to have our own version of that called Stump Jenni. So we'll be right back after this. And we are back now with the section that we are going to call Stump Jenni. And some of these questions actually, I think, are play off of what we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Okay.
We were talking about Bank Street.
Okay.
And someone says, were there banks on Bank Street?
No, there were no banks on Bank Street. It was mostly on the side of the coulee, so it's access from Crescent Heights area down to what I guess is now Altawana Drive sort of area.
The riverbank.
Yeah, the riverbank. So we did have somebody who was definitely sure that Bank Street was about their Mr. Bank, their great-grandfather. It was not, in fact. It's more of River Bank than anything else. But no, there were no banks on Bank Street.
Okay. This is a related question to that. There was a house on the right-hand side of Altawana Hill as you drove up the hill.
Okay.
For years, the white and purple-like bushes blossomed, and you could see the remains of the house, too. Whose house was it?
Oh, okay. I do know those lilacs are still there, and the house would have butted up right at the end of near where the railroad tracks are. Whose house was that? I don't know.
We'd have to look in the Henderson directories.
The Henderson directories. Oh, the good old Henderson directories. That always will tell you. Though that does get tricky when you're looking for something that's been torn down. It's very difficult to try to find something. When you don't know what year it was torn down, you basically grab a book of the Henderson directories and hope for the best. So.
Okay. Question, can people come and look at your X-File folder?
Yes, anytime. I had a group of a couple teens that came in, and they said, I'm looking for something, but I don't really know what. I want to do a project, and I want something that's like weird. And I was like, oh my God, girl, I have you. And I brought out the X-Files, and they were here for hours reading through my X-Files. And it's like everything from cows getting abducted by aliens, of course, to like back in the 1900s where it was like the UFOs, like the flying objects that they weren't sure what it was. Could it have been an airplane? Those sorts of things. So the X-Files are, anytime you want to come, I will happily grab the X-Files out for you and we can look at them together. I just love it. And then every time I peek over their shoulders sometimes because they go, oh my God. And I was like, really? What part was it? Like, I almost want to know where they're at with it. I love it.
What is the oldest building in Medicine Hat?
The oldest building? I know the oldest house. The oldest brick residence on its own foundation is the Duggan House, which is right beside us. The oldest actual house is in Riverside. It is across the street from Hargrave Park. Today it's I guess it's a trailer park, but there is a house that's the one house that's there that's facing the street. It's an actual, like, a built house. That is the oldest standing house. It's wooden though, so it's a little bit different than the Duggan House. So the Duggan House that's close to us is the oldest brick residence in Medicine Hat.
Okay. Someone just wrote on here 2 lanes of Monarch Bowling Alley. I don't know if
2 lanes of Monarch Bowling Alley.
Were there 2 lanes at the Monarch Bowling?
I feel like
there was the King Edward billiard
the
next
billiards.
To it, but,
that's true. I feel like I should staple that into my X-Files. Like, just unassuming, just stick that in there without a question mark on it.
I'll
leave
save
it.
it.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's your favorite letter in the archive?
Letter?
Letter.
My favorite letter. See, what happens is that archives, it's kind of sad because a lot of the times we only get one half. So we only get letters because, the person receiving the letter is the one then that donates to us. So then we don't see the other half of it. If it's one side, it's a letter. If it's both sides, it's correspondence. We very rarely get correspondence in the archives, so we only ever have letters. But one time I was going through some files and I found correspondence. So I found both sides of it, and they were very loving letters to from a young lady to a young man who was serving in the First World War. And I'm going through, I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. They're talking about reuniting with each other after, and I miss you so much, and I hope you're well. And I'm thinking, oh, this is such a lovely story. It's so nice that we have both sides. And then I was like, wait, why do we have both sides of the letters? And then I looked into his attestation papers, and I found out that he died. Oh. So unfortunately, the reason why we had both sides of the letters was because she did remarry to someone else, and after he had passed away. And so the reason why she had the 2 sets of the letters was because they returned his set to her when he died. Okay. So she kept it for 70 years. She kept these letters, and she said that it was always so close to her heart, but she felt that the archives were the place for it to go because, unfortunately, he had passed away. So there wasn't a family connection there. They didn't actually get married. But so that's one of my favorites. But it is hard because you're looking at it and thinking, oh, this is so sweet. And then, oh, no, it's so sad. So, yeah, many of the people I look up in the archives are sadly deceased.
Yes.
So.
But I can see a movie in those letters.
Yes, and it's very loving and very cute to see, and you can tell that there's a lot of tension there because every time you're writing, you can tell that she's worried she's not going to get a letter back, and there was that last letter where she never received a letter back from him. So yeah, you could see in her writing that she's very nervous about that. So
I have letters. I'm fortunate to have letters between my grandparents.
Oh,
my grandfather came to Medicine Hat in 1904, working on the CPR with the intention of making enough money so that he could bring his fiancée, or he actually go back to Fleming, Saskatchewan. Oh. But he writes to her about things that were happening in Medicine Hat in 1905, 1906. And in one of the letters, he says that Medicine Hat is the roughest place he has ever lived in. Oh. And he had lived in places in northern Wisconsin along near Duluth, mining towns and whatnot, but Medicine Hat, he said, was the roughest place he ever lived.
I feel like in those early years, that might be true with the Northwest Mounted Police and kind of trying to take back the West sort of idea. It could have been a little rough and tumble. We were pretty far from the major cities, and so a lot of the times when there was anything to do with like justice or anything to do with, charges or those sorts of things, they had a long way to go before you went to actually a court case. So yeah, I could see where that would be a little rough.
Who do you think is the most influential hatter in history?
In history? That's a really tough one because sometimes there's people that you don't even know are medicine hatters. One of the ones that's my favorite, I don't know if he's the most influential, but I think he's pretty cool, is Roloff Benny. So I do have a picture of him. He's in an airport. He's on the tarmac, and he's in a plane. So Roloff Benny was a artist, and he was a photographer, and he was born in Irvine, and he was raised in this area. And then he went on to, in 1947, he left to Europe to go be an artist, and he never lived in Medicine Hat again. But he ended up being one of the most interesting artists I've ever heard of. There's articles I found about him, and they talk about what he's wearing a mink coat, but inside out, so that the mink is touching his skin. And they're putting this in like the newspaper in Milan. Like this is so interesting fashion about him that they really need to talk about his coat and what would happen if it rains. And he lived in a 12-room apartment building overlooking the Tiber River in this very interesting place. And it's one of those places where it looks like exactly like what you would think a very strange, eccentric, odd artist would live in. And they said the headline of the article says that Benny lives in a 12-room mansion with manservant and husky, like the dog. Huh. I think they were talking about a dog instead of the manservant. I'm not too sure, though. And they go on to talk about him, and he ends up being one of those really interesting characters. And he wrote a book. He did many art books, and one of them is a book about Iran, and it's called, it's about the destiny, and they're talking about all these different things about it. And it was really brought to my attention because this person comes in and he goes like, do you have a funding problem? And I go, oh, I don't really think so. And he goes, well, I have a funding solution for you. You're going to do an exhibit on Roelof Benny. And I was like, okay. And then he goes on to tell me, he asked me if we have the negatives, the Iran negatives, and I said no. And he goes on to explain this very strange story of Roelof Benny to me. And he said that Roelof Benny took the last photos of the king of Iran. So the Shah of Iran was a very influential figure, and he was deposed, and Iran went and collapsed mostly after that. But Roelof Benny took portraits of the royal family and took portraits of the queen in, shorts and a t-shirt. Like just these things that you wouldn't think that an artist would be taking photos of. And so Roelof Benny ends up being a very well-known photographer. And when he passes away, his estate is worth over $12 million. And he's this, photographer, this artist from the Medicine Hat area. So I would say he is one of the big ones for me. I think he was a very interesting fellow, and very quirky and strange. And you just kind of wonder, how did someone from Medicine Hat get to this level? But yeah, he went and did a lot of influential things. I think he's probably one of my favorites. We have a lot of his books, and then I bought a lot of his other books because I was like, this is so interesting. So yeah.
Roelof Benny lived up on the hill,
yes.
And my grandparents had a garden on the hill on Belfast Street, and when he was a young man, he used to come and sit in the garden and paint the flowers.
Oh.
Do you think he would have given my grandparents one of those? No.
Oh. Well, you'd be a millionaire if you would, so maybe you wouldn't be a part of that. But yeah, and I did another event where I was doing a talk at the provincial building, and out of nowhere, I just look up and I'm like, that's an original Roelof Benny. And it's just hanging in the conference room. I can give you the room number if you want. Of the Roelof Benny picture is hanging in a conference room in the provincial building, and it's signed. And it's very interesting because I said, how did you get such an interesting painting? Like, it's very rare to have a painting of his because he mostly moved into photography. And the people in the building were like, I don't know. I'm not sure how that got there. I don't know what it's from. We don't know why we've had it. And I was like, okay, give me 5 minutes and a crowbar, and I will solve all of your problems for you. Because if you don't know why you have it, you probably won't know if it's missing. But yes, they're very interesting artworks, and I only got to see that one in person. The Esplanade does own a couple original Roelof Benny paintings that you can take a look at too, but a lot of his are very black and white, very stark. And then he moved into photography. So I would have loved to see some really bright oil paintings or flowers. That would have been really neat.
Yes, I wish we had those pictures of the flowers.
If only.
But sadly lost to history. What is your favorite thing that has come across your desk recently?
The favorite thing that come across my desk recently? Oh boy, that's a good one.
Not hair.
No, preferably not hair, though that has actually come across my desk recently as well. Let's see. I think probably it would be, we had some interesting requests about genealogy. I think that's really fascinating how far people can go. And we had a very interesting fellow who came in and was doing a lot of Métis history. And just watching people's eyes get wider and wider, the things that we have in the archives is so interesting because they think, just bring me out everything you have about Métis history. And I said, do you have about a week? And he goes, a week? I'm like, yeah, you'll need about a week. So we have a lot of very interesting Métis history that has been captured from, the oral histories, like I mentioned about Saratoga Park residents and things like that. So I brought out all of these things, and just watching him be able to go through this and find these different stories was so fascinating to me. He's such an interesting fellow. And then to be able to have all of these pieces that we have available to the public that they can look through, I really loved that. And I thought it was really interesting how it was connected to Canada as a whole. You can find a lot of things about, the Red River area in Manitoba. Like, you find all these different places that are also reflected in places in Medicine Hat, especially from people who moved away and came back here. It's either that, or anytime anybody asks me about the POW camp, then I go, do you have a couple days? Because it's like we have stacks and stacks of information about the POW camp. And or SFTS, that's another one that people are really interested in. I think you have a couple really cool pictures of SFTS stuff.
We do have some pictures there of some of the planes. I believe they were Harvard's.
Yeah.
Jim probably will know. Jim Marshall sitting in the front row.
Oh, yes.
He'll know. The pictures are taken in the Avro Anson, I think, was the other plane they trained in here.
Yep. We
nope,
got...
not that one.
That's Roloff Benny, yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, he's in the center there with his beautiful coat on. Not a mink one, though, and not inside out yet, but...
That's the ornithopter.
That's the ornithopter. Oh, no.
Jim told us the story when we were at the Monarch last week about this fellow who wanted to get this plane off the ground, and it never really got.
I learned from Jim that they paid $5 for the pilot to pilot that ornithopter, and I think it was a tough sell. If you take a look at it, it does not look like something that would be getting off the ground. I call it the Spleen Crusher 2000 because just look at it. It's a terrifying contraption. It was run off of a motorcycle engine, and the wings kind of like flapped almost. So it was meant to be like I guess it was supposed to be a man-powered craft, and I don't really even understand why they decided that they were going to do this. But I eventually found out that the person who, Cadwell, who invented it, he ends up going back to Ontario, where he's from, and is trying to continue to fund this ornithopter plan. And they have it strapped in a car, in a train, and in a train car, and he goes in to go check on it because there's a slight crash, and it crushes him. So he died by getting crushed by the ornithopter, the very ornithopter that he had invented. So suffice to say, the plan didn't continue from there. But yeah, the ornithopter is a very interesting one. We added that onto the Esplanade Cup because I thought that was the most interesting, strange little tale. It is not something I would want to pilot or get in at all. The safety is non-existent. I love that he's wearing his beautiful dress shoes while he's in the ornithopter. It's not a safe looking contraption, if you ask me.
I think we do have pictures of the planes flying over Medicine Hat.
Oh, yes.
The bottom right corner there, I think, on the gallery there. There we go.
Yep.
Yeah. You can enlarge that. You can see the planes in formation.
Yep.
Over the southwest hill.
Yeah.
Great shot.
And there's parts about SFTS that I didn't realize. They called it the aerodrome. And I did not realize that it was something that the federal government put together as a plan. And you could basically receive this pile of plans of how to build it, where to build it, what the schematics were meant to be, and all of the requirements. And the federal government would kind of give you this package. And then you would build the Service Flying Training School. So a fellow contacted us and he said, I found this trunk and it's all full of these plans and these blueprints, and it was for SFTS. And part of it is that they required that there was a runway, a supplementary runway 3 kilometers away. Yeah. And so that kind of solved a question that we had before, because of course there's the runway, there's the airport, but then there's 3 miles away, there's supposed to be this other runway for if the runway is compromised, you need to have another runway instead. So this guy had this trunk full of plans. I tried my best to convince him to donate them. He's not interested. I'm not surprised, because they're very cool. Mm-hmm. But yeah, SFTS is a very interesting one. It brought a lot of people locally here for training, and it was a huge boom to Medicine Hat to have this SFTS here. So I love the picture of the planes flying over. That's really neat.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great shot. There's King Cooley as well. You can see the area now. Well, you can still see some of the old Konrad golf course there too. The dots where the golf course was.
Yes.
That's very interesting. What is the actual true story about how Medicine Hat got its name?
Oh, no.
Do we have time for that?
I was like, fade to black. This is going to be too complicated. There are at least 13 different stories of how Medicine Hat got its name, and each one has its own validity to it. The city of Medicine Hat kind of chose an official story that they wanted to use for the naming of Medicine Hat, but, we even have something that's called the Gillette Scroll. And so it is a handmade, I don't think it's very pretty, but, they sold them. So they're these big scrolls, and it's written all the way across, and there's little pictures there. And it goes on to tell this tale about how there was this great war between these two warring indigenous factions together. And it's very stylized, it's very interesting, and at the very end of it you realize that none of this is true. It was sold as a souvenir item, so it was sold en masse as something, as a collectible. So we have lots of different copies of it, and sometimes every once in a while people will come in and it's fully framed and they'll go, I'm willing to give this to you. And I go, I think you should keep it because I have about 19 of those already. So it's not unique. It's interesting, but it's not something that is something that we want any more of in the archives, I would say. But that one's just kind of one of the ways that is kind of popularization of this story. There's a book it's called What's in a Name, and then the Medicine Hat section. So it's a book about every name of all the different places in Canada. But the Medicine Hat section is about 15 pages long, because they have to tell all the different stories of how Medicine Hat got its name. And it really depends on who you ask, because there's oral tradition, then there's like actual stories themselves, there's evidence, there's non-evidence. So that one is too difficult to say what is the true story of how Medicine Hat got its name. It's too tricky to say who's going to have the right answer there, but I do think that it's certainly an indigenous story. It's an oral history that's been passed down, and I think that finding the truth in that definitely involves a lot of connection with the indigenous communities to find out which ones are able to tell you those stories, because certain cultures believe more in the serpent that you hear of in the river, whereas others see it more of as a mermaid in the river, and others see it more of like as a great spirit rather than a physical entity. Some have it related to the river, some have it don't. And then also the headdress itself is always a difficult one, because every group has a different headdress in the way it looks. So I know that, when there was murals, or when I was doing research about Medicine Hat and how the headdress should have looked for the Medicine Hat, even that in and of itself can be totally different based on the different groups that are available to look through. So we have some that are headdresses that are quite small and they're pointed upwards, and then there's some that have the big feathers that head backwards. I've even seen some with the buffalo horns, which is kind of the stylized one that you see on the Medicine Hat News.
Yeah.
And so, it's hard to say. That one would be in the X-Files. It will have to remain there, because I'm not too sure the right answer on that.
And there's also a follow-up on that. In that Medicine Hat, back about 1908 or 1910, some business people in Medicine Hat thought that was not a dignified name for a city of our importance.
Yes.
We must change the name.
Yes, Gasburg was one of the options that they chose, and then Rudyard Kipling got involved there because he had a little bit of a stake in the matter. He really liked Medicine Hat. He had visited here, and he had really liked the Medicine Hat as the name. He thought it was all your own. It was this interesting little place. And then he penned this very interesting editorial, and he wrote quite scathingly into the newspaper about changing our name and what he thought about us changing our name. And at the end of it, he says, "Why? What would we call a city who turned its back on its own name? Why, Judasburg." So he was very invested that we don't change our name. So instead of being called Judasburg, we have remained with Medicine Hat. So yeah, he said that we should never change our name. It is all our own, and there's magic in it. So I really love the name. I think it's really interesting. Though if you try to tell anybody online about where you're from or what you're doing, they're really, I don't understand why your name is all like that. But I love it. I think it's really great. So.
Well, there are lots of stories that we could continue to tell.
Oh boy, yes.
I think we'll have to have another visit at another time.
Sure.
Jenni, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for chatting with me and going down the rabbit holes with me.
This has been fun.
It has been. Thank you. That's it for this episode of Echoes from the Archives. If you're in Medicine Hat and want to explore our records for yourself and see what you can discover, you can visit the archives in person Tuesday through Friday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the Esplanade Arts and Heritage Centre, or browse our online collections at esplanade.ca. We'll be back soon with more stories waiting to be uncovered. Thanks for listening.